Okay, I'm now calling the Sherborn Conservation Commission meeting of February 2nd to order. And I guess we'll do it as I move to open the meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? And then a roll call vote. Michael Lesser, aye. Jacob Strauss,
Aye.
Courtney Eck,
Aye.
Carol McGarry,
Aye.
Steve, oh, there you are, Steve Scrimshaw,
Aye.
Matt Olier. I guess I've never actually. How do you pronounce your last name?
Olaire.
Olier.
And
Okay.
it's an aye.
Yes. Thank you. And I guess we don't have Matt tonight, as he said. Okay, the meeting is now open. Does anybody have any additions to the agenda that beyond the 48 that fall under the 48-hour rule? And just pop the agenda up there. Okay, hearing none, we will proceed with the agenda. We'll proceed with working on this. We have the land management at 7:20. Since we have actual hours there, I will hold on and I will just go to an announcement that I want to encourage. Let's see, I'll stop sharing here at the moment. I want to encourage people, as I sent out in an email last night, I believe, I can't remember, about the MACC conference. Just encourage people to sign up for some sessions. It's all by Zoom. It's all reimbursable. I will particularly pick on Steve and Matt and encourage you guys to at least try to do, I tried to highlight two of the fundamentals that I think would be great to have you guys do for your own basic understanding, and then bringing back to whether after years of doing this, we're missing things. And so those two sessions there, I think, if I remember right, are actually in the early evening on some nights that we don't meet. There's clearly a lot of other fundamentals that you can go take. But those two seemed particularly interesting, and I'd love for you guys to take it so you could also tell me and tell all of us what they actually say compared to what we do. So I strongly urge that, as well as there's a million other sessions. Carol sent an email too, listing them. And there's a whole bunch of them on solar that I want to take, as well as just learning about soils and delineations and stuff like that, as well as just best practices kind of sessions to sort of get another view of what's going on and what other people do. So highly encourage everybody to do it. It's pretty easy from the links that are there. And I guess with the Zoom, it's easy. I was about to say we could carpool, but I guess we don't have to. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I have to say, I kind of missed that it's not in person. That was such a fun day to see everybody there, and kind of, it was nice because you get a flavor for what other commissions are doing sometimes. Do we have any idea if they're going to continue to just do it virtual going forward? I was surprised it was virtual this time.
Who knows? It's a certain ease. I could see how it's like,
Yeah,
except for one set of sessions, you can actually have the flexibility of doing a lot of different sessions. But a lot of them are scheduled during the day. It's interesting how it sort of presumes people don't have jobs that are somewhat more specified, that are more 9 to 5. But I guess with a lot of people working at home, maybe there's a little less of that. But yes, I was kind of surprised by the fact that it's only part of a Saturday where they have concurrent sessions. So it gets a little tricky. But yeah, I don't know when they'll return. It's a tricky one, even for me. I miss it, but I have my concerns. with COVID myself, but most people don't seem to. But on that note, it's 7:20. Now, we have on the agenda the inventories of conservation parcels.
Yes, I think this probably relates to an email that I sent before the last meeting. Is that right? Which was that that little land management task force that has been, working away with trying to come up with recommendations, have taken it upon ourselves to read through the inventories that were done for 4 of our properties that are absolutely wonderful inventories, and great descriptions of what's really there on the land, and recommendations about things like invasive management, replacement of signage, trails, etc. So one of the things that came up, and that I hadn't even realized before, is that there were some videos, some wildlife cameras were put out on Peters Hill to capture video. And they're so much fun to look at because all sorts of critters were captured on these videos. There's 2 videos. There were fisher cats, raccoons, a bobcat, different hawks, an owl. It's just really fun. So the thing I wanted to talk to people about is, is there a way for us to get it on our website perhaps so that it's available to people, along with the inventories themselves? I think at some point we're going to want to have kind of a more public, well, we may not be ready for the inventories actually, because I think we were going to review them and then decide on the best way to present those. But certainly the videos are very fun.
Yeah. I guess I don't know who manages our website these days. I haven't done anything. Joyce, have you ever who has control over it or what?
I will find out.
Because right, we could also post a link on the town events thing to our page. But right, we can certainly stick all that stuff on our thing there. But right, you and Deborah can figure out who and what and why of that. We used to have a Facebook page, conservation.
We still do,
that-
but
yeah.
somehow the rights to, like the password and everything got messed up with changing administrators and people leaving. So unfortunately, it's kind of been orphaned out there, which is a bit of a problem. And that maybe we can get some help from IT or something about that. How can we kind of recover that page?
Yeah, I don't know if people will go look at it. I don't know how you get it out there other than post things on Nextdoor, say, hey, go to the site here or go to the Facebook page.
Yeah.
But we could resume the Facebook page. People have trouble getting a lot of interest in some of this town stuff. Even like Gino, who had an interesting planning board blog, but he didn't really get a lot of action there. And it's a challenge to figure out how to get people's attention.
Yep.
But I'm game to sort of put that there and at the inventories at some point in the videos and make links all over the place and drive people towards it somehow. You can even put it on, we have a Sherborn sustainability page. Maybe we can get them to post a little link there and stuff, but whatever. So game for that. But I guess at some future point, we're going to hear about what's going to be sort of harvested from the inventories about as a plan. Okay.
Yep. And I think we haven't had a meeting in a few weeks actually, but we're passing around the inventories, and then the idea is that we will make some recommendations. Certainly a lot of the recommendations will be related. The thing that actually could use budget, as Kelly has brought up, is invasive plant management. So there's going to be a whole discussion about that, I think. But this is bringing up, and I'll ask the land management group to give some thought to this. And obviously, if of those of you who've read the inventories, you might want to give some thought as well, which is, do we feel like we should just post them? I think originally Jean had the idea that I think we contracted for those biologists who did the work to do a presentation, which would also be wonderful. Like, for instance, it sounds like the library is finally going to open. I think it could be quite wonderful to have, an evening session with them coming in and presenting, and people, the members of the public, having the opportunity to come and find out more. So that's probably really the best way to let people know about those inventories, is actually host some kind of event.
Yeah, we have them all in our documents folder. There's something called inventories. I should probably change the name. Land inventories, open space inventory. So even we know what it means, but
Yeah.
I think we need to, right, we were supposed to have a whole big public presentation, but COVID really blew away that whole
Yeah.
approach. But maybe it's going to be time in the good weather, maybe in the spring, we'll do it outside. Or by that time, we'll just have to make the plunge and have an event, and people can wear masks if they want and such.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's time to go figure out what to do with that, since we do have some budgets that we can use to do some of the things there. We haven't done much lately on the land improvement. Okay, is there anything else that you want to talk about on the land management?
I think that's the immediate thing. I know Kelly has talked to us about budgeting and financing, and I'd like to leave that to him. He's certainly wrapped his head around that more than I have.
Okay. So while we're dealing with little miscellaneous, I guess no. I see it got posted in here before we have a few minutes before the hearing gets started. I think it's at 7:40. 7:45. So covering a few other things I can't tell who you, Deborah, or Joyce, posted this new land management file system. Is there anything else for us to talk about?
Yeah, I just wanted to let the group know that the last couple of weeks have been kind of busy in the office, because they're taking all those old files and now they've allocated a land management filing section. So quite impressive. So you go in and then you will see it'll be conservation will be in green, and it has its section. Then building department will be right near there, Board of Health, and Planning Board. So seems to be working pretty good. The folks, the professionals who are working on it and have been working on it for the past couple of weeks come up to me with questions, but actually it's been pretty good exercise, because some of the things that were long before my time, I've had to explore a little to give them a little bit of assistance. But I just want to tell everybody it will be a lot easier of a system to navigate. And our section, conservation, will be all done tomorrow. So if you come in and you want to check something out, I'll be more than happy to show you folks. There's also an archives room now. Remember that room that was COA that was in the basement level?
Yep.
So all of that has been organized to the end of the hall. And again, same configuration. So now you'll have conservation, health, and they promised me that they're going to give me a very clear mapping, so I can share that with everybody too.
Okay.
Where did COA go?
Digitizing, oh, what?
Where did COA go?
COA went upstairs. So
Oh.
they're sort of next to the cafeteria, the little lounge,
Hmm.
staff lounge, and of course the conference room upstairs.
So they're in the place where we used to be.
So I understand.
But where is the conservation office now?
In the basement,
The basement.
Oh,
there's a bigger space there. They put all the land
It's
management.
the garden level. It's not the basement.
Oh,
That's right. That's right. And we do have windows and we do have light.
Oh, good.
Are they digitizing much of the files or?
Well, at this time, they are not, but now they will be all set. That will be the next step. So I
Okay.
understand that will require a little bit of capital allocation, but it's coming.
Okay. Good. We certainly have a lot of paper.
Yeah,
And,
so that will be an exciting move.
Right, but it's been nice that we get stuff electronically now.
Yeah.
Although I was reading the State Wetlands Protection Act itself, not the regulations, the original act.
Hmm.
It was interesting to see how has right in the, I don't know how we get around it. In the first paragraph, it is every applicant's supposed to submit a written application. All the NOIs and everything has to be absolutely on paper, which I guess we still get one hard copy. I'm wondering whether we could ever get away from that. Have it electronic, but
So that's come up a lot. How many paper copies do you actually want? We say that we take 7 or 9. How many do you really want? Because you
It's-
guys don't take them anymore. Unless it's a complicated project.
Yeah, I think I usually go if I think it's kind of complicated and I want to see the big version of the plan. Go pick it all up.
yeah, I guess maybe, I mean, I can't remember if it's in our regulations what we want. And whether we need to change the number to a certain minimum of 2 and with the discretion to ask for more. So that we
I think
start.
that's reasonable. Two is reasonable.
Well, I mean, I even wonder, well, because right, one we need for the file and one could be marked up and whatever used by you and whatever. And whether we should get 2 good copies and then with the discretion to ask for more when comes up. But I don't know whether that's in our regs. We should go clean that up if it is a regulatory requirement to have that many. But does that seem reasonable to everybody? People, I don't know how many of you have been getting paper copies, but even I haven't.
I've never gotten a paper copy of anything,
Yeah,
and that's fine. I'd much rather have PDF copies.
Yeah,
okay. So let's advise people to give us 2 good paper copies and we'll see if we want more. Like if Carol wants, or one of us wants a big paper, then you could find out and hopefully they could act fast enough to give us that, or we can use one of the 2.
Or maybe they could
2
just,
copies.
if I'm the only one who really likes to see the big paper copies, maybe we just say we only want one big paper plot plan, you know?
Yeah.
I like it because I can mark it up and look at it more easily if it's a complicated one.
Right, but just for, I'm thinking for timing issues that if
Yeah,
we get 2 good copies of everything, including big ones, we could always give one of them to Carol or somebody else and then ask them to get another one that replaces our office copy. So that we don't hold up anybody. Okay. Well, thanks for that, Deborah. We'll see how that all works out. Let's see, what else have we got here? Other agenda little items here. Gonna have to still catch up on minutes. Somehow we will figure this out. And get caught up. Minutes, is there a warrant of any note, Deborah?
No, there is not.
Okay, as to the FY 24 budget, covering the last discussions there, we went before advisory for the preliminary meeting. Oh, that was a week ago, who knows? And there were essentially no substantive questions, except for the tricky issue of that we're budgeting for a person who we don't have. And we're budgeting for a sort of a ceiling of what we were we've basically been advertising the job with it up to a certain hourly rate. And we've budgeted that rate. So that we have the flexibility to hire to that. And so we have to provide a little bit more justification for that ceiling. So we have to work on that a little bit, even though it's an up to number. And I can understand that there could be some budgetary issues around. You put in the ceiling, do you put in a lower number, and then we get a reserve fund transfer, we have to go more. I could see that there's some complications we'll have to go work out with the advisory and the select board about that. But in principle, there was not much. A lot of departments have recognized the problems of hiring good staff. Seems to be, as we hear about in the labor market in general. There's it's just difficult. I mean, I gather even though people ask, why don't we get people, whatever, but even we hear in neighboring towns that they have issues. So we'll work on some more justification for the budget there for the next session, which will be
Public hearing?
yeah, I guess the public hearing in March. Yeah, I think. But we'll work on that before then. Work with our liaison as well as some of the other members there to talk about what the issues are with the hiring process. And we've done some re-advertising of that position. Okay. That covers that. We got a few more minutes. The administrative approvals. I see, I'll just read it out here. We have two of them. We have 0 Brush Hill Lane for soil testing. And we have 71 West Goulding Street for a solar array. For those, Joyce, are those both basically outside of jurisdiction?
So 0 Brush Hill, it's back for a second. It's a big parcel of land. The first one they did, there was no, the testing didn't work. So going to an opposite side of the property, down closer to where there are wetlands, then they'll be staying outside the 100-foot buffer zone. So that's approved. And the solar array is there is wetlands. There's quite a bit of wetlands on the property, but they are keeping it to the far side of the driveway.
This
The
is
driveway is actually area.
is this a ground mount system?
Yes.
Okay, that's what's unusual. Okay. We don't have too many of those in town. But okay. Nice to see a little more renewables. Okay, it's now 7:40. So I will now reopen the continued.
Is it 7:40 or 7:45?
Oops, I
7:45.
blew it. You're right. I'm getting a little too eager there. Sorry, Karen. Let's see. Any site issues or questions?
No, there aren't.
Okay. So there's no site issues. We're done with our, let's see. We're done with everything here on the agenda except for the scheduled stuff that we have here.
Can I make a comment?
By all means.
So Westwood is paperless. We're talking paperless, where we do a online agenda, and it's a software called IQM2. And we put everything on that agenda and send it out to the commission.
What's it called, Karen?
IQM2.
And I mean, we have, so that's where, that includes all the files for all the permitting issues and whatever with the agenda. Yeah, I mean, we have something here where basically we're all looking at I guess it's a Microsoft product of SharePoint, where basically we have folders with so everything is there electronically. So you don't require, so does anybody file give you any paper in
Nope,
Westwood?
no.
And so what, that you, so you don't have to, it's in your regs, it's
So
in.
you submit, we have online permitting also.
Mhm.
So they just submit the application online. They don't even have to come into the office. They can pay for it online. And that's with view permit. We use software called view permit.
Yeah, I think we were looking at that, something like that at one point. But what I was gonna say is, even though the state act, Wetlands Protection Act, talks about delivering something in the office, somehow you found a way to get around that.
Yeah, yeah. Does it say that in the act?
I was just reading
I
the,
just read it, yeah.
I was just looking at the act for other reasons, for our regulatory processes, trying to understand buffer zones, resource areas, and I'm reading this thing, and right in the first paragraph is like, should be hand delivered by this, and this, and there's no electronic option, because it's written so long ago.
Central Region DEP accepts online copies.
Higher email, an emailed copy, Central does, Northeast does
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, you're right.
Northeast wants it paper copy.
But I guess, so interesting. I would still think that for going into the field and stuff like that, it would be nice to have a piece of paper in your hand when you're marching around on a site visit. Could
can
you
print
go
them out
all-
as needed.
What's that?
You can print them out as needed.
Yeah, yeah. I print out a copy and take it with me.
But it's
Right.
hard to print them out really big. I mean, that's expensive and hard to do.
Well, the question is whether we only require the plans to be in paper, and whether we allow all the actual notice of intent filing to be electronic, except for the plans. And whether that's a compromise to save some paper, and how that works with the town filing system. I guess we should go see whether, I guess if Westwood could do it, then I assume we can do it. I mean, the question is whether to ask, whether to change, whether people feel like we could change our initial thing of to say, you need one complete copy of everything on paper and one extra set of the plans.
You know, I guess maybe this is from like having my entire career working in high tech, and I would certainly be interested. I guess, Jacob, you're in IT, so you probably have some thoughts about this, which is that if we were going to do any switch like that, we should have whoever handles our IT involved because of compatibility issues, making sure that everything works correctly. And, you know, it's funny, you think that if it's digital and it's stored, there won't be a problem. But for instance, when I was on historical commission, we put all this stuff on CDs. Nobody ever uses CDs anymore. And some people don't even have CD players. So there is this issue with obsolescence so that's really why I think we have to take some guidance from IT and say to them, you know, we want to do this. And that system you're talking about, IQM2, is, you know, I mean, that Westwood has a contract with those people to be using that software. So that's an expense.
Well, no, we don't have to have that. We have our own setup, and there's electronic with DEP. I'm just arguing, saying that that maybe and maybe we'll still have one paper copy. I'm actually going back to a little refinement, since there's a lot of 8.5 by 11 pages that get done in the NOI itself. Whether we just feel comfortable saying that we just want one full copy in paper, and then a second copy of all of the plans. We don't need a second copy because you don't, I assume, Carol, I don't know if you look at the actual NOI itself as opposed to the plans. When you do.
Now I look at all that stuff in the Microsoft Drive. Except
Okay,
for the plans I like having printed. Yep.
fine. So let's let's cut it back so that we just ask for one complete paper copy and one extra set of paper copy of the plans as a starter. So we save a little more paper. Okay, 7:46. I am now opening the continued public hearing for the notice of intent for DEP number 283-440, of 15 Pleasant Street, map 10, lot 39, for the proposal to replace a failed septic system. And here we have Karen Skinner Catroni representing Joyce Simon. Okay, how do you, Joyce, and you, Karen, how do you want to proceed? I can put up the plans on my screen with the comments, for example.
You could put, yeah, if you could put the plan up, that'd be nice.
Grab the latest revision, Michael.
I think I've got it. I hope I opened the right file. Let's see. Did I share the right thing? Do you guys see a plan, two things
Yeah.
side by side?
That's perfect.
Okay. I've blown up the plan to the with the wetlands here at the top here that have been reviewed by Joyce, I gather, and then here's our 50-foot, and here's our 100-foot.
No, that's the 50
Oh,
right
oh.
there.
What's this?
That's a 25.
Oh, it's a 20. Oh, yeah, it didn't look right to scale. Okay, there we go. Here's our 100. As we can see, most of the yard is in it. Okay, how do you guys want to talk?
Why
it
don't we
through?
let Karen proceed?
Okay, great. So this project, as stated, is for replacement of a failed septic system only. I was before the commission at the last meeting. A site visit was done on, I believe, 1/21/23. I was unable to make that. I was away. There's been several changes to the plan based on that site visit. The changes include 2 silver maples within the 25 to 50. The northern and eastern slopes will be planted with New England Conservation Wildlife seed mix. That's the, yes, right there. 2 bounds have been added on the 50-foot.
Mhm. Are they here on this part?
There-
Or,
So if you go to the system itself, Joyce,
oh, I see here,
whoops.
here. Yeah, I see it here.
yeah. The tree in the rear of the system will be protected, and a tree well will be added to protect that in the future. And the existing and proposed tree lines have been added to the plan.
Mhm.
The
Yeah, yes.
proposed system has been moved 50 feet west. I'm sorry, 15 feet west.
Right,
And
protected those 2 trees there, right?
And then the third one, go right above that, where it says 20-inch elm. So he's got a little tree well around that.
Oh, yeah, I see that here, right? Okay,
so there's 2 trees within the system that need to be removed. One of them is dead.
right here.
Oh, there's a dead one there, yes. Yeah, that's gonna be removed, and then there's 2 within the system, yeah. And new flag 6A has been added to the plan.
Okay, right. I guess that's somewhere up here.
I think it's 6B was added.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Okay, yes,
This one here.
and that's about it. So Eric has responded to the comments that Joyce had, which are shown on the right-hand side of the screen. I can go over those briefly if you'd like.
Yes,
And
maybe we should.
Basically, that's saying a lot of the same that I did. The existing and proposed tree line have been added. The system's been moved. The 2 trees, silver maples have been added. And 2 bounds. Conservation, wetland seed mix. And flag 6. So basically, yes, I've stated all the changes that he mentions in this letter. And I also sent Joyce the performance standards today. I actually forgot to send them earlier, but it's pretty, straightforward. It's going back to pervious, so and it's in lawned area, so it shouldn't really have too much impact on the wetland.
Okay. Do you have any comments to add, Joyce, before I open it up to the commission?
Well, I just have one question for the commission to think about. That's, when we did this, this is a similar situation to, was it 29 or 49 Farm Street with the septic with the slopes that we had, that we're gonna leave to go natural. Did you want to mark this? I'm pointing as if you could see when I point to the screen. Did you want to add a third marker at the back corner of the septic system to, so that protect that slope right there, from being mowed? But that was my only comment. They addressed everything that I had concerns about.
Okay. Okay, so there's an issue about markers. I'm gonna review that. Okay, I'd like to open it up to the, I'll go last this time, let other people make their comments first. So other commissioners just chime in. You can raise your hand or just start speaking.
I'm not sure I had additional comments because I liked all these changes that were made in response to the site visit and Joyce's comments, so.
Okay. Others? Or others say, oh, I assume you're silent, you don't have any comments?
I don't have any comments. It's a very tight space. I think that the changes seem good.
Yeah,
And obviously getting a failed system out of the wetlands, near the wetlands, is always a benefit.
yeah, clearly. And right, given all the other circles of whatever, there isn't much choice for doing that. Okay, then is anybody else, Jacob, Matt?
I was just looking at the question about whether there should be a third marker. I don't know that I have I don't think I have a strong opinion there, since that third corner is away from the wetland side. I think as long as the first couple of years get the expected mowing schedule, I'm less concerned about that side than the other ones with the plan markers.
Right. Matt, do you have any comments?
No, I agree. I don't see the necessary utility of a third marker.
I guess I'm a little, yeah, I'm trying to just digest how this whole area here, the vegetation of all this, given that a lot of this area was somewhat disturbed during the soil testing. But I think, that, I'm just trying to think through the vegetation here. This is just basically a conservation mix. Is that something that gets mowed once a year? What's the maintenance plan?
Twice.
What's that?
No more than twice a year.
Okay. Is there a reason why it's twice versus once?
Shown on the plan, but I'm sure they won't mind changing that. I'm sure Eric won't mind changing that.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to think from a wetland point of view of whether, or just habitat or buffer zone, whether having it be more, have more vegetation there would be,
The only advantage to mowing it at least once is that you discourage woody vegetation from growing over the septic system.
We could say once in the fall.
right, that's what I was leaning towards, at most once then. And question is that on the sides of from a septic performance point of view, does it make a difference if there is a some vegetation, woody vegetation that grows up on the sides?
Well, not trees, but how do you discourage trees from growing if you're, the idea was you don't want all the root system to grow into the, where the, this will be water fed. The effluent will be going in there and it'll be a great source. Roots are all gonna try and go for it. The idea is to keep your root system as far away as you can. So, so
You-
shrubs are great, but how do you discourage shrubs and trees and not?
Yeah, no, I'm just
Sure.
trying to think. Right, I mean, it becomes much better buffer zone to the extent that it becomes more diverse vegetation than just the mix. I'm trying to think of whether roots will basically go, because this is on, these are graded. And to the extent that any trees, I'm just curious whether any trees grow at the 100 or 101 topo line, whether their roots are actually gonna become, I guess over time, if you get a 20-inch tree. I'm trying to think of whether a tree growing there is gonna be such a problem for the performance of a septic system.
Are you, Michael, are you saying that you think a tree could grow even though it's mowed once a year? I don't think.
No,
it-
I'm actually wondering whether you want to mow it at all. That basically let it go more natural. And that whether that, especially on the side towards the wetland, that having a more diverse, even though part of it is the problem is that whole area there is just is mostly invasives. Right, I sort of would be nice to that, but I guess that's buffer zone of a sort. That it's not a very diverse wetland area there. Well, buffer zone. I guess traditionally we we're trying to avoid having trees grow. I don't know how far, I guess it would be interesting at some point to know how far away do you need to keep trees from a septic system? Do you have any sense of that, Karen, just for a general principle of whether you're trying to keep trees 20 feet, 10 feet away from a septic?
The roots will grow as large as the drip line. So it depends on the size of the tree and where it is. But as Joyce stated, you do want to keep the roots out of the system.
Right. No, I'm just wondering how far they go. I
Well,
guess,
I pointed out the roots typically follow the drip edge of the tree,
Yeah.
right,
So as far as the leaves go out, that's how far your roots are going out.
right. I guess there's no way of controlling that unless there's stuff there. Okay, how about if we move to just basically having it mowed once a year and in the fall after I think we typically have what, September? I can't remember, Carol, what we've done in the past.
Yeah,
Um,
I think out at the fields, we do either late September or early October. I think September is reasonable for most
Yeah,
people.
fine. Let's just have a mowing sometime after September, if needed. We don't require, it shouldn't be required. I just think that it should be just even if needed to remove woody vegetation or trees, or trees could be removed manually. I mean, I don't even mind wording it that way, that they don't have to mow it except to remove woody vegetation that might, tree vegetation. Okay, so that, I would also like the condition that outside of this, I see the erosion control there. I think that there should be a condition that any areas that have been disturbed. Because I think, I can't tell if there are areas outside of the limit of work that's here, that's been disturbed from the soil testing and all that, because that I think all disturbed areas in the buffer zone should be restored. Or not, or I guess I'm not quite what I guess should be restored with a mix. So it should go beyond the limit of work for the for the plantings. And as to the monuments, I would, I guess, I know they're placed at the 50 there. Yeah, I mean, I would probably go for a monument. Third one, I'd actually, when I was out in the field, I'll just muse out loud of whether we needed a one more monument out here at the edge of lawn, just so that people know that the lawn's not supposed to be expanded over here
I think that's a good idea.
in the buffer. So I
Where,
would,
where are the other ones right now?
right now, they're right on the edge of the septic here and here. I
Mhm.
mean, I could see having one here, as Joyce suggested. I would be in favor of something there and then something here.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know if we need more than because there's the buffer zone goes all the way over here and there's a whole edge of lawn here. I mean, I'd actually, or maybe if we don't do it here, we just put one around here at the, somewhere here and then somewhere here, just to let them know that they shouldn't be expanding the lawn. If they don't like what's growing there, because of the invasives, they could certainly come back to do an invasives removal and some better landscaping that's more, that's buffer zone friendly. But I would actually, in terms of protecting the buffer zone, given that we're inside the, I think the edge of lawn is around the 50. I would like to have some monument at the edge of some, not defined by the 50, but just at an edge of lawn here and further along here. That I would see what others think, but I think just to make it clearer that those areas are buffer zone that need to be protected.
Is the area that you're indicating the edge of lawn, or because I see the,
Wherever the edge of lawn is,
oh, I see, okay.
wherever the edge of lawn is, somewhere over here towards this far point and something in between there in the septic, whatever the current edge of lawn is, to put monuments there. I'm not quite sure where it is, but I would just condition it that there would be two monuments, markers. One sort of, I don't know how to mark it here. Well, we could stick it on the plan at some point, once we figure out where edge of lawn is on this. But one that's further out here, that it's, that's quite a distance away, but still is well within the buffer zone. And one here. Two monuments is what I'm suggesting. I don't know whether other people are willing to vote, go
But
along with
right
that.
now it shows a tree shrub line boundary, right, that's right around following the limit of work. Is there lawn on the other side of that?
I have no idea how this matches up. Because the limit of work is. This is, I don't see a limit of work here. There's this limit of work. This is the erosion control for limit of work. But I don't see exactly where the edge is here. But I remember being there and seeing that there's a lot of lawn here, and there was a clear demarcation between there and the buffer to the, and then the vegetated areas here, even if it was mostly invasive. But I would just like to have, let's see, I have to be more clear. I guess that's a property line here. I guess I would put in the thing, something close to the property line on the edge of lawn, and then something halfway between there and the other monument. I would just put it, add two more monuments there to protect the buffer. Comments on that?
That makes sense to me.
Okay. That is, I don't know, whoops. Yeah. Just have to wonder when sloughing around on this thing. Does that seem like it'll be amenable to people, Karen?
Yep, oh yeah, that's fine. I can have Eric get that tomorrow.
Okay. And the 2 trees here, right, for whatever reason, is there some reason for the location of the trees here by any particular question?
I believe that Eric thought that was a good place to put the trees.
Okay, sure,
Or put trees on top of trees.
right, okay. Okay, any other issues for people before we close the hearing? Guess I
I
think,
just have some questions for clarity.
yeah,
One, obviously, there's a maximum amount of mowings being as part of this. Is it being suggested that there be a minimum amount of mowings? Is that typical of this kind of project for us to ask for?
we've often asked for the minimum, really minimum and max. We just specify because of the issue of stuff growing on this in the septic system as they're discussing that they worried about tree roots. I'm actually trying to do it a little differently in the sense that we have a maximum of 1, but that they could do less with the goal of just avoiding. They could do it every 2 years. For all I care, if that would probably capture all the woody stuff anyway.
So there's no, I just was unclear to me, that's all. Is there a minimum amount of mowing that must be done on any part of this property?
I would say I would have no minimum as opposed to just a max. And let them work with the goal of avoiding substantial trees on the edge there, but from a wetlands perspective, that's not an issue. But I could say that they could have trees growing and just snip the tops off of them, for all I care. I would just specify a maximum of 1 cutting per year and work to ensure that they could have less, but just work to ensure that no substantive trees grow. It's a new thing, but I'd be willing to condition it that way. 'Cause
Okay, it's just unclear to me what we're asking.
Okay, but I would say a maximum of once per year, and they can do a lot less, as long as they avoid substantial tree growth.
Okay, and the other question that was a little unclear, you're talking about trying to get rid of some of the invasives in the buffer zones and possibly even into the wetlands. I don't know. Is that something, I just was unclear what was being proposed or said about that.
As far as I can tell, there is no proposal to do that mitigation. We could, if there was more going on and where we would require some sort of trade-offs, we could say we would like some invasive removal, but I don't think we have a basis unless they want to do it. And we have
Okay.
a basis to require it, even though it could certainly be useful to do that along with some plantings. But I would like to think that we could put in, I would like to put an informational thing in the cover letter for the order of conditions, or even whether it's just a qualitative note in the order to say that we note that there's a lot of invasives there, and that coming back to the commission to do some invasives removal and appropriate revegetation would be welcomed.
Okay, welcome but not required.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
Just put that in the cover letter. At one point, we talked about invasives, if they, for example, if they were cutting down the trees, more trees, or I would accept if they wanted to, if they were, instead of planting 2 trees there for mitigation, I would say if you wanted to do invasives removal and some shrub. And maybe we could put that as a condition, that we could say the mitigation is 2 trees, but that they could come back within this order with what would be a minor change to shift to invasives removal and some lands, some shrub plantings.
Okay,
Yeah.
that answers my questions.
Yeah, no, helped me because I would actually like to put that as part of the condition for the mitigation. Anything else? Okay. I think we've gone over what all the conditions will be, including this last little thing that I would like to put in that opens up the mitigation to beyond 2 trees. That is an option for them. So it'll make it easier for them to come back within this order to substitute an invasives removal with some other plantings is an alternative option for the mitigation. So with that and the monuments and the plan here, I move to, there's no questions about those conditions. I move to close the hearing. Do I have a second?
Second, I was giving everybody a chance.
Yep. Let's see here. Okay. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Michael, I. Steve,
Aye.
Carol,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Jacob,
Aye.
Courtney.
I,
The hearing is closed. Let's see. As to our discussion now, based on the hearings and the conditions that we discussed and everything else, anybody have any issues around finding that this project can proceed with these conditions? Okay.
no issues. Time for the motion.
Yes, the mushy motion that we always have.
Hard part.
I've prepared a final special condition.
Which
It's in the files, OOC.
I'm not seeing this because it's not been. I'm just
OOC, it's in the.
Oh, I have to refresh. It wasn't showing up. I was looking for it today, and I guess I keep forgetting that I have to refresh this system continually. So. Okay,
So there are a couple of things that I'll change, the monument.
Mhm. The monuments and how the mitigation is done.
Yeah, I'll work in how you, said that somehow.
Yes. That would give them the alternative mitigation, because to that there, and we have the new regime and the regime for maintaining the sides. Do we need the sides? It's the sides towards the house. I guess that could just be basically lawn because it's already an existing lawn.
Yeah, that should be lawn.
Yeah, that's existing lawn, so it's makes sense to keep it that way if they want that. Okay. I will make the following findings and then a motion. As you see here. I'm always trying to think, we've always read these things. I'm trying to figure out what makes the most sense going forward, since we can have this on the screen, but I'll selectively read. I always had trouble with this part. Based on the hearing, we have the following findings: that the proposed project consisting of decommission of an existing failed cesspool and the removal of what's really a hazardous 34-inch elm tree and a 12-inch dead tree, and the installation of a replacement septic system, all of which will work within the 100-foot buffer zone and some in the already altered no alteration zone, plus the planting of 2-inch caliber trees with the option to do some invasives removal. The installation of 4 wetland bounds with markers. And the slopes to the rear of I guess to the east and north of the leaching field would be planted with erosion control conservation seed mix and left in a natural unmowed condition. That
I'll be with that.
with condition with minimum maintenance to avoid woody plants or trees is maybe a way to generalize that. That we find that the proposed work, even though in the buffer zone, that they provided sufficient evidence to demonstrate that the proposed activity and the mitigation procedures and our conditioning will not alter the bordering vegetated wetland during or after construction, if all the conditions in this that we've discussed are met. And to the extent that I think I don't have to read the rest of that there. Recognize that this area is significant to many of the interests of the Sherborn Wetlands Protection Bylaw. And therefore, I move that the commission approves the project subject to the findings and conditions as discussed.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Michael, aye. Courtney,
Aye.
Jacob,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Carol.
Aye.
Okay, project is approved as discussed. We'll get you the order and you can go forth and clean up things better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Okay, you too.
Bye-bye.
I see before we move on to other things, I see Stephen Greenberg and Timothy Coate. Do you mind saying if there's any particular issue you're here for or that we could address?
Steve Greenberg here. I was listening in on 15 Pleasant. Thank you for the approval and appreciate all your efforts.
Oh,
Stephen, where does the order get sent? Because the house is unoccupied and that's the only mailing address we have.
Actually, the owner will be there tomorrow, but would you mind sending it to my office, or I can come by and pick it up?
Are you the representative for the
Homeowner?
from the homeowner?
Yep.
guess if we get some written documentation of
Yeah,
that.
if you can send me if you're gonna see them, you can get a written document that says you're the person to represent, a representative for them, then we can send it to you.
I'll have the homeowner send you an email, Joyce, or
That's fine. Yep.
okay,
that'd be
copy
fine.
me. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good.
How long would that take before I should pick it up?
We'll send out a notice.
Okay,
Yeah, it'll take a little bit of time to
We have to
find.
get everybody to sign it. I'll have to
Yep.
come in and sign.
okay. Thank you all.
Yes, okay. Have a good night.
You too.
And
Hello, Timothy Cote.
Yeah.
Hi, Timothy Cote. I'm a new resident of Sherborn. I'll have a matter before the commission shortly. I just thought I'd drop in and see what a meeting looks like.
Oh, sure, by all means. Welcome.
Thank you.
Enjoy it. Maybe you want to join it.
I might. Thank you.
We can't resist making a plug. Okay. So now let's move on to our last agenda item. Discussion of the ongoing process of amending our bylaw wetland regulations. As an issue has been come up that I think we've talked about in the past and often comes up is this process of doing amending our regulations, that we always at some point have a public hearing that we advertise more than the minimum, and including the fact that we try to do our regulations are fairly limited in a certain sense, that they just say, which can be different ways of interpreting it, I gather, from the way I hear it there. But our regulations essentially say that we have to have, actually, let's just pull it up here. Let's see here. Page 15, I'm just going to share it so you know what we're talking about here. Okay, here we go. License. Okay, here we go. Amendments. 6.3. That we have, this is the wording there.
Can you make that bigger, Michael?
Sure.
I mean, I've read it, but it's very small.
Yeah, sure. I can't tell since I have a much bigger screen.
Yeah, that's good.
You can see even what the lawyer amongst us might say. That right, we've always historically done this through a process where we have a public hearing that's advertised, which we normally only, it's only 48 hours here. We historically have done this process where we've advertised well in advance, several weeks at a minimum, or not at a minimum, often at least maybe a week or two, and that we've also tried to put forth a, we always indicate, the hearing has to indicate what sections we're changing, but we've also tried to put forth to people well ahead of time a copy, an initial draft of what the changes are that we're thinking of doing, even though during the hearing we often make substantive changes to an initial draft. But we try to get a flavor, we try to share with people ahead of time what it is we're looking at considering doing, which is sort of what we started last week, is sort of trying to prepare the kind of things that we think we're going to change, and then we could produce a track edited version of our regulations with some of these initial versions, and including issues that we haven't decided on, and that there are some issues that we can decide on during a hearing versus in this preliminary discussion. I have interpreted this thing to mean that we could have preliminary discussion, and that provided that we then go over all of this work and put it out ahead of time and get enough people involved that we can as part of the actual advertised public hearing, and redo the discussion of anything that is of substance. But there's also some views that, and we've struggled with this in the past, of whether all and any discussion of regulatory changes has to be done as part of a public hearing, which I don't interpret it this way. Maybe we're getting an opinion from town council.
It looks like, yeah, it looks like Jackie's going to get an opinion from town council.
Right. I guess I just want to make sure that whether we're clear about the fact that anything what we do is just preparing some draft issues and thoughts. So I don't want to, but of course I don't want to undermine the validity of our process in terms of where we end up. So we can go see what town council says about it. I felt comfortable with what we did last time, but others, maybe not all of you, do feel that way based on this reading. I don't know whether Matt the lawyer feels like that this is, but I'm curious what you would think. Not that you'll have to give a formal opinion.
I mean, it's pretty benign, straightforward language.
Mhm. Does that mean we could have like the discussion we had last time, but that leads to us producing a draft and we go through it all very detailed, inch by inch during the actual public hearing, based on a preliminary draft that we would produce based on like the discussion of last week? Would that comply with this, in your view?
I'm not an expert on,
Okay.
I'm honestly, I'm not sure I would be able to comment on that any more than any one of you guys.
Okay,
I mean, I can interpret statutes, but as far as this, it's so specific that I don't think I would have an opinion that would carry any more weight than any of you guys.
okay. Well, maybe we'll play it safe and do it through the hearing, or we'll see what they say. I have no problem with us going to a hearing approach.
Michael, I guess I would just say, once I saw 6.3, for me, it reinforced that it has to be a public hearing because it specifically says for discussion. I know it's kind of a pain, but I'd rather err on the side of, dotting our i's and crossing our t's, and do it in such a way that nobody says afterwards that we didn't provide public input, or enough public input, or didn't, alert the public enough.
Well, I plan to do a lot more than this. I would do a lot more than this requires for public alertness.
Yeah, this is
I
kind of
just
minimal.
read it differently, and that's fine. I don't mind being more conservative. I read this as that for the discussion of the proposed revisions, that we would clearly do that. The idea that we have discussion about what we're gonna propose ahead of time outside of the hearing it doesn't, I think, invalidate the process we would follow, but I have no problem playing it more conservatively. And we'll see what town council says. For the purpose. And right, I want to do something that everybody feels comfortable with.
Michael, can I make a suggestion? I know you and I talked one-on-one about, how do we proceed? And I did take a fair amount of time to look at the document called Sherborn bylaw, which was prepared by the consultant Matt Byrne. And it really, lays out, personally, I think it could have been written in such a way that's more intelligible to somebody who hasn't really been in the process, but it does basically lay out some of the goals that we had in having him review it. And then as I looked at it, I realized that he's proposing amendments to specific sections of our regulations. And I guess what I would suggest is that we perhaps at the next meeting have him join us just to do an overview of what he saw in other towns that informed this analysis. And then we can start breaking down our discussion by which sections it would amend. Because, I like you, Michael, I've looked fairly carefully now at the beginning part, which I feel is a little too disorganized, but, in the end, in the second part, he's very clear that he's, offering amendments for the burden of proof, which is section 3 for us, for definitions, which is section 2 for us, for presumptions, and for the preamble, for general performance standards and so forth. And I think by taking that approach, perhaps we can kind of chunk this up. The other thing I would say is, I know you had a concern that then we have a hearing that could go on for weeks and weeks. And when we did it before, it did take some time. I know that the open meeting law does allow us to have offline discussions. We just can't have a quorum. So another thing that we might do, just from a process point of view, is have Matt Burns speak to us next time. And then we have individual commission members or pairs of commission members take specific sections, look at his recommendations, come up with recommended language and the reasoning for it, so that there is some pre-work that's done. And I know, that that's absolutely allowed. When I've gone to MACC courses, it's pretty clear that other commissions do that, but then, the real discussion in the quorum is taking place in the meeting. So I guess those would be some thoughts that I would share with the commission to consider about how we do this, because it is a big chunk of work and it requires a lot of thinking and eventually down to a lot of detail thinking.
Yeah, I was, that makes some sense to me. It's a matter of, I think that, I mean, if I was like to think if we're bringing him in, I'd like to actually have more substantive, because we can figure out which sections these things pertain to in terms of what we would have to put, because just for everybody to be clear, how we've advertised historically, the few times, I guess I've been part of doing this maybe twice or 3 times. I think just twice. Once was a bylaw in addition. The issue has been that in the public hearing notice, you list all the sections that you're going to amend. In this case, we're going to be making changes in so many places. We could just basically list the entire document practically. So therefore, I'm not concerned about what it is we're going to do. It's more a matter of producing a draft to circulate to people. But what is, I think, interesting to that, I would like to even suggest that we could do tonight, beginning broad discussion that we could decide whether this is also whether we need Matt to do this, is that some of the issues raised here in his document that we've looked at, that I think are general principles about how far we want to go, definitions about what a resource area or a buffer zone is, that these are issues that we could discuss as a group. And just to even understand what kind of regulatory changes of what nature we might want to take. That I would actually think that since we have a little bit of time with a light agenda tonight, that I would think that it doesn't jeopardize the process, but others might feel differently, just to sort of go through what his document actually does do, and some of the issues it does bring up, so that it might help us guide our thinking about regulatory change, as well as when we actually go to talk with him, that where there are having some preliminary discussion of some general issues, like what's a buffer zone or what's a resource area, that it would be more fruitful for when we bring him in. And so I'd suggest that we sort out that whether we have that we could still bring him in. I guess the question is, I'd like to sort of walk through this document just to understand what's here, and then come back to that issue of how we do the next meeting and when we bring him, and whether we bring him in under an open hearing or we bring him in as a discussion item. After we sort of walk through this thing, just to sort of understand what it is that we're looking at here.
Michael, I'm fine with doing that as long as we don't get into discussion, just to err on the side of caution. But that's kind of what I'm suggesting that he do. But if you feel like, you're familiar enough with it, I guess the other thing I would say is you are by far the most familiar on the commission with this, having gone through the process before. And I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that there are people fairly new to the commission who don't have the context of longer time people, which is where potentially having Matt come in a somewhat introductory manner could be helpful for everybody.
Okay, well, we could see whether we still want that. If we won't get into that much discussion, but we can see what it looks like to sort of walk through this thing and give it a little block of time here in 20 minutes or something, and see how far we get and what kind of discussion we get into, to see whether we feel comfortable with proceeding.
I think what I really feel like in terms of discussion, if we get into the substance of like, should we do this or should we do that? We're probably in agreement that we shouldn't do that. But what might be helpful, Michael, since you feel like you have a good grasp of the flow of this document, would just be to say, this is what I think this section is trying to do. This is what I think this section is trying to do, that kind of thing.
I'll see if I stick to that. You can collar me in and raise a big fist or something if I feel like we're going too far.
Yep.
So unless somebody else objects, I'd like to sort of tackle this in that sort of level and see how far we get and what kind of, whether we're finding this fruitful or not. If people are not, people could certainly chime in and say, we don't like this and we should just do it in the context of a hearing where we could be more free flowing, then I'm game to change tracks, path here. What I'll say is that essentially this document here that the consultant prepared, who knows, a year ago, that you could see in the beginning what some of the goals were that he lists there, because we started out with the idea that we were trying to provide more guidance for ourselves and applicants about working in the buffer zone, in particular the outer buffer zone. We do have performance standards for the inner buffer zone that are, I guess I could have put them up, that I guess are very general. I even have some questions about them. That they're fairly, I don't like the way this thing pages out here. I'm going to actually shift stop screen just to give a little context of, shift to another screen. That here we have our current regs. This is under Section 5 performance standards. This is a generic standard term that's used in the Wetlands Protection Act. That's, as you can see, what the first paragraph says what they are. And the last time we revised this thing, we basically tried to figure out how to provide more guidance to applicants and to guide our own thinking. The no alteration zone in some ways is a little simpler. Sorry. And so what we have here is it only goes a little bit onto the next page with some more factors, but going back here, you can read the introductory paragraph here. That we are basically defending the logic of the no alteration zone, that the starting premise is that any alteration in the no alteration zone will result in adverse effects or impacts on the interests of the wetlands protection of basically our regulations and the state and local laws. And then we just sort of list a set of factors that people would have to address in order to overcome this presumption. And it's when I look at this now, after many years ago that this was done, I might have done it even differently now, but this is just an example of the fact that people then write things against us to say if they feel like that, let's say a septic system has to be done in the no alteration zone, that they then address some of these things here. Some of it's quite detailed. And some of it's fairly general about what it is to result in erosion. So this is an example of somebody would have to somehow defend that for all these different factors, they're not significantly affecting it, but even I have trouble with how you really operationalize this, like reduce the capacity of the buffer zone to detain, filter, and infiltrate runoff. What does that practically mean? How do they do that to overcome it? But so, but these are at least a set of very concrete things. These are issues that we have to confront if we're trying to protect the wetlands. So all of these things have values. There are important values to protecting the functioning of wetlands. So that's fairly clear. Whatever. So even how you operationalize this, I have some issues now in hindsight. But this is the no alteration zone, which is is more greatly protected, and that we generally manage to protect this quite well.
Michael, can I interject quickly that,
Sure.
we refer to these as performance standards, right? So when an applicant comes before us, they have to demonstrate that they're not going to impact negatively. They have to reach the standard of not altering shading, not reducing input, and so forth.
Well, it's that they will not significantly.
Yes.
So that's the problem where it gets tricky. Is the concept of that we don't want adverse impacts on the resource areas. And therefore they have to demonstrate that these activities will not significantly do these things.
Right.
The issue of significance is always the crux of, it gets hard to quantify or discern that. For example, if they cut down a tree or two in the buffer zone, that in terms of leaf litter and woody debris, is that significant? One tree out of, let's say, 50 trees, you could say, fine, but that significantly do anything. It's that kind of stuff that gets a little tricky. But somehow these have helped us and helped other people, and we've managed to then get mitigation or other things. With some mitigation, you then say, fine, you're not reducing the tree litter because I'm putting up another tree. Or somehow, how do you decide that some activity is not going to filter or runoff, make the filtration of runoff worse? So we're trying to make, I'm trying to think of here, alter the physical and chemical soil properties.
Michael, can we go back to I feel like I don't want to relitigate.
I don't want to I'm just trying to say this is what we have now in terms of thinking of what we're
Right.
going to apply. I'm through with this then. But
Okay.
this is some example of that. If I go back to what he was, let's see.
Sorry, I feel like we don't want to get too bogged down on that.
Yeah, no, it's good. Now, now here. So in his document, he spends a bit of time here going into what is the buffer zone of this 100-foot area. That buffer zone is not really, the word buffer zone doesn't show up in the bylaw. It doesn't even show up really in the state act for wetlands protection. It's strangely only mentioned that the riverfront does not have a buffer zone. The concept of a buffer zone does not mention anywhere else in the state act. Even in the regulations, they define it as 100-foot. They somehow, when they decided to create regulations, they somehow created that 100-foot number, just suddenly appears in the state regulations. However, they decided to make it 100 versus 125 versus 50. Our current regulations simply copy that definition of a buffer zone as being that 100 feet out. He reads the initial part of because we do have something different than the state. Our bylaw includes in the list of areas that we have jurisdiction, it includes all of the what's standardly resource areas here. And it includes or within 100 feet of, oh, that's the storm line. That's the storm line. That's not even the God, he even has a strange quote here. But whatever, he raises an issue of, let's see, I have the bylaw here. Oh, yeah, he actually 100 feet subject.
You know, he's just quoting section 1, the second paragraph of our general wetlands bylaw, right?
I know, I'm trying to think of where he gets the impression, in the end. Oh, upon, or within 100 feet, okay, I was reading it incorrectly, or within 100, I was reading in a reverse. This language here, or within 100 is in our bylaw, it's not at the state level. It gives us jurisdiction. We don't really define what a resource area is until we get to our regulations. Part of the issue here in this beginning part is it's basically saying, essentially from my point of view, there's some comments that I was making here that you've not seen.
Michael, can I say something? I'm really concerned that you're getting into a whole bunch of interpretation. I think it would be better to just go through what he is trying to say here so that people can then read it and we can.
Essentially, he's establishing that this 100-foot buffer zone, he makes the argument that it's actually a resource area. We can discuss it. I disagree with that, but that he makes an argument, but in the end, it all comes down to whether it's a resource area or not. He's trying to go into the fact that what I see here is that he basically goes into the fact that there's a strong legal basis for coming up with performance standards and for protecting this 100-foot area. Whether it, the only reason of that when you read this document, that somebody, a previous commissioner, was concerned about that, well, not concerned, was interested in whether by that somehow it could become a resource area that then has another 100-foot buffer zone around that, which is an interpretation that we will have to discuss. And that, but in the end, Matt himself doesn't make an argument for that. He just makes a strong argument that this gives us a basis for doing regulations and performance standards of this 100-foot zone that we now call the buffer zone. And so that, I mean, but he does make this thing that the bylaw establishes 100-foot as a resource itself is something that we will have to discuss. And what that means, whether the term is not used in many places.
What term? Buffer zone?
Resource area, the idea of what a resource area is. We define it different we define it in our regulations, but in the bylaw, there's no use of the term resource area.
But one thing I would mention is that Dover uses exactly the same language, by the way, to describe their jurisdiction. So it's
that's fine with the jurisdiction. The question is the only practical implication is whether somehow there's a jurisdiction that goes, do they go beyond the 100-foot buffer in Dover?
No, it's really literally the exact same language.
Yeah,
and
all I'm saying.
Presumably they're construing it the way we've always construed it, which is that we have jurisdiction over 100 feet.
Right, that's all I want to be clear, that we have to discuss and be clear to ourselves, if we're not going to discuss it tonight, that that whether the way we have it, that by the issue of calling it a resource area means that it creates another buffer zone or not. And that's an issue that we'll have to discuss as part of the hearing. But in the end, he doesn't argue, he talks about it that way, but he doesn't come forth with the idea that there's another 100-foot beyond that. So he goes into various things that intricacies that about what a buffer zone is.
Can I ask a question? Who made the suggestion that there might be a second 100-foot buffer zone or resource area or whatever we want to call it?
This is a previous commissioner raising that issue based on reading this.
All right.
No longer on there.
It was a question that she had. You can see
Okay.
that this is why I want to go through this document. It's a little bit confusing. And this is actually why I still think it would be helpful if the author came to us, because he put together a document that, in my opinion, was not that well organized. Then there are, JB had questions, Michael had answers in this version, although actually, Michael, this is not the version that you
I'm
told us.
gonna put this in, I'll upload it. for
Yeah,
people.
so that's where I think it actually would be helpful to kind of go through this as an overview in our next meeting, because this whole kind of, discussion, I don't think it has to be a big discussion personally, but I don't want to discuss
Right.
that.
Yeah.
No, you don't want to discuss it now, but I don't think it's a discussion that necessarily has to involve him.
Well, in keeping Carol's point in mind that we don't want to be making decisions or even necessarily discussing substantive issues one way or another, I think that when we're discussing this issue in particular, we could just put forth the question, does anybody read it in that manner? Because I'm not sure anyone will. And
I
then,
think
and then
that's why I think it would be helpful to have him there, because he's the one who's actually reviewed other towns. I mean, I saw it in Dover, the exact same language, which I assume they're not saying we govern 200 feet from the wetland, right?
What I'm saying is that, right, unless we bring him in for a whole broader set of issues, I think that this issue is relatively minor. But I just wanted to bring it up that somebody else viewed it that way, but, and right, it's almost like an intellectual point for me as to whether you call it a resource area or not, but that we can discuss it and whether we can have a discussion with him about it, but I don't think it's going to be a major issue. So as long as we bring him in the context of a lot more than this, is my point about bringing him in and not spending a lot of time on this issue. But I just want to highlight it, and I'll put it in. It has my comments as well as more clearly marking JB as to somebody else who just made some questions and comments. But this beginning part,
If you can scroll down, I think the next section, he talks about exemplars, and just to give us
yeah,
some.
I will get there. I know you might think I'm going, but I will I will resist that for the moment. As you're going through here, in the end, there's some paragraphs here that I put some extra little carrots here, which is where he sort of looks like he concludes about the fact that there's some interesting issues for us to discuss about how we want to do these, when we want to think about doing regulations for the outer buffer zone, to what extent we want to make a differentiation between what the wetlands are like, which I think will be an interesting discussion. To what extent that certain wetland, how we decide that certain buffer zones require more protection than others, is an issue to think about, and to what extent we protect certain special areas more than others, and how we make that judgment and put that into regulations. So I think I will, when I post this document in there, it's a new version of this document, that I highlight that for people to think about, that whether we want to do that. There is then in here, as Carol noted, he's pulled out examples from language from some other towns about various performance standards and things like that, that we have some of this and we have some others, and then there's some general language, but again, a lot of it is, to me, general language that I'm not sure how much it operationalizes anything.
Well, Michael, I
it's
would.
logic.
This
But
is
there's a
one
logic.
area where I would say that, what he is suggesting here, and some other commenters are suggesting, is that in our well, we shouldn't go into too much about this, but he is suggesting essentially, in addition to an early part of our regulations, to provide, kind of strengthen the overall philosophy. I would say that's what he's.
I agree with that. I have no problem. It's just a matter of, once we do that, it's a matter of, it strengthens and it gives a justification. Like, so there's examples from other towns which includes a very interesting example from Lincoln, where we have different regulations for new lots versus existing lots in terms of protecting the buffer zone if it's unaltered, which you'll see here, which I highlighted in yellow, because it is it's a very clear, distinctive statement that we have to discuss at a higher level. Then there's some description about burden of proof issues, and how we do that. That's the whole idea of giving them the option to either who bears the burden of proof, and then what kind of information has to get provided. And that whole issue of what credible evidence means is what we have to get at. And we have some of that on our regs, but we might have to clean that up more. And then he proceeds into what I interpret here as a sort of a kind of an initial draft, where it provides basically a preamble of the summary of some of the stuff from above that I'm not sure I agree that we could just decide whether we like it all or not, whether it covers it all. Just to give the basic justification for why we are having protection of the buffer zone. That we don't spend as much time in our current regs. We don't have this kind of language in general, but there's a suggestion of putting this kind of thing here about the buffer zone. And then there's the starting with then the meat of it becomes a little bit more of a presumption of what is there, just like in other ones for the no alteration zone, we have a presumption of a significant impact unless they show otherwise. The burden of proof is on the applicant. In the next 50 to 100 foot buffer zone, which this thing doesn't differentiate here. But the question is the presumption, what presumptions do we want to have about them? Whether it's altered, whether they're different for whether it's altered or not altered. And whether we have, as above, different kinds of buffer zone have different kinds of presumptions. And whether we want to differentiate if it's a particularly important environmental area, do we have a different presumption than other kind of areas that are seemingly less of a lower quality that I'm not sure how to do, but that's why those other points are interesting. But then there's this issue of a presumption of what you have to overcome, and there's some specifics here. And then there's general performance standards, as he has here, which I find, right, you're trying to get into some nitty-gritty here about whether you allow a loss of a certain amount of the outer buffer zone or not, and whether you have minimum vegetated areas or not, and how you vary those. The discretionary activities down below are just simply a lot of the exemptions. A lot of the exemptions that we already have anyway in our document. But there's how you do this. And this begins to overlap with some of the issues I raised in my other document where I give a whole set of factors to think about whether these performance standards vary by, if it's a flat piece of land, it might have different performance standards than if it's something greater than 10 or 15% slope and things like that. If it has a certain kind of wildlife value, then maybe we have different performance standards if it has certain wildlife values that are more in that other document that I put forth with a set of variables, and how much those are asking for information versus we actually have numbers of, like, if soils are a certain type, then we might have different performance standards because they're not going to filter the water and the water will just erode and run over the surface. Do we going to get to that level of specificity? Not many towns have that, but I was trying to think of whether we could have a few more practical ones there. That's basically that other document where So it ends up with these performance standards, and his first thing here is there's not a lot here. They're fairly minimal, but maybe that's the best you can do. Trying to go back to his examples, then we can go back to his examples from other towns. But again, they are fairly simple too, in terms of just probably having certain kind of vegetated strips. Where you might require longer vegetated buffer zones when the slopes are different, for example. Like, could you allow more activity in the outer 50 when there's no slope versus if there's slopes of greater than 15 or 10 or 25, then you want to have a 75-foot or 100-foot vegetated area. That kind of performance specifics we can talk about. And then in my other document, I list some other variables, whether we do something by soils and we do something by wildlife habitat quality. So that is, now the question is how much more discussion do people feel we could do about some of these higher level issues, buffer zones or any of that other kind of stuff, without having a hearing, or whether we should immediately just open a hearing and it'll just go on for quite a long time as we do it, and just let other people know that the hearing is going to be held in two parts. We're going to have a lot of upfront discussion, sorting things out is my proposal. And then at some point we will trigger and inform everybody that we will actually produce a working draft of a document that we'll go through carefully, where we want to make sure more people are in attendance. Once we get closer to something that we might want to adopt, so that we can tell everybody we're having the hearing in two parts versus the part I was going to have is preliminary discussion and then the formal hearing, but we could just expand it to both parts.
Michael, what if we do, we can see in our own regulations that we can do a public hearing with 48 hours notice about the discussion. So why don't we do that? I would feel very uncomfortable discussing in any more depth at this point. I do not want to risk us getting into some kind of issue here, but we could do that for the next meeting and, be able to hopefully have that top level discussion. And I think if we have to describe what it is, we really are, describing, we're going to be discussing recommendations for changes to the bylaws and to the entire bylaw or we can list each of the sections. So I think that's what we should do. I think that'd be easy to do, and we can use the next meeting to kind of go through this in a little more detail. And I don't think it'll be done in just one meeting. I think we'll get exhausted, but we could, do, as you said, do half and then the other half to do an overview discussion and then get down to more specifics on what we want to write.
Okay, but in short, basically just do everything within the hearing. Would you adjust that if town council came back differently?
I mean, we're only giving 48 hours notice for a public hearing. I do agree with you that, when we get down to reviewing the wording, it's probably a good idea to use the more, I asked somebody to put it into the shared folder there that we have used a very detailed kind of process to notify people well in advance. And I think in our next couple of hearings, we can decide if at the point that we have actual wording to discuss, do we want to then have a more elaborate and longer notification process?
Oh, without a doubt. To me, that's not, to me, it's not even an issue of discussion. It's like we really, to me, it's that we want to do just in the interest of public comment and whatever. So to me, the idea of broadly getting at a bunch of the whole select board or the planning board, anybody, And just put it on even whatever next door, just to say what we're doing, that I'm all for. It's just a matter of at what point that we do that, and with, so that when we have much more concrete things for people to look at.
And in the meantime, I feel like the 48-hour notice it's not onerous. Doesn't mislead anyone, and we've covered our bases.
Sure, no, we would do it for much more than 48 hours, because we have to put it in the newspaper. And the newspaper comes out on a Thursday. So we would have, if we're doing it at the next meeting, we'd have to post it, send it into the newspaper, I think. Deborah, to get it in next week's paper, we would
Well, the very last hour is noon time on Monday.
okay, so basically we would just have a very broad, that we're looking at the entire bylaw. And put that in the thing there, so it'll get out on the 19th, it'll get out in the paper on the 9th. For the meeting on the 16th. Do we have anything scheduled for the 16th?
We do. We have. We have a amendment to an OOC on 0 Maple. And we have, oh goodness, a request, right, determination, right. So we do have 2, and I think we've tentatively scheduled, that's how we had to advertise it, for 7:30 and 7:40.
Oh, 7:30 being the,
request for determination for soil testing.
oh, that one's an easy one, and then 7:40. I don't know, does this
It's
look
an
like it's,
amendment of that Maple Street, 0 Maple Street.
oh, the one that is,
Yep.
that was quite a, so we,
So I'll put that on the folders for people to review. I
is
was
it
not part of
a
that.
lot of changes, or are there a lot of changes there,
The
or?
house is bigger. So there's grading and house changes within the buffer zone.
Oh, is it expanding its footprint in the buffer?
It's not necessarily, well, a little bit, yes, it is changing the footprint. I'll see if I can't sketch on the old plan. I'll print out the old plan and see if I can't get it a dashed red line and what's changed. Or I'll ask this Shane to do that, actually.
That's a difficult project to begin with. So that is going to be a difficult process. I don't know. That's,
Well, we don't have a date, an end time on that, because we don't have anything after that at the moment.
unless something comes in tonight or tomorrow.
It had to come in today.
Oh, okay.
The time has passed.
I mean, I'm partially asking this so that we know what time to advertise a hearing for on the regulations. So the question is, do we do it at 8 o'clock or 8:15?
Well, you know how complicated it was before, so it starts at 7:40. What do you want to go to?
Right.
What do you think it will go to?
I mean, unless we basically don't resolve it at the next meeting. And we continue that discussion. Whether I'm just trying to decide if 20 minutes is enough. Or half an hour, or I guess we should have some minutes that we can fill in. We have one set of minutes, that whether we then do it for 8:15. For the regulations.
You think we'll finish Maple Street by 8:15?
Well, I'm more concerned of whether we.
I'm asking you.
I have no idea. I guess I don't understand how much the changes are.
All right, well, we'll say 8:15 for the other one.
And yeah, no, I'm trying to figure out whether If it's minor enough and it's just shifting around the footprint, and well, they're providing something. Because most of it is also deciding whether it's a minor or a major amendment. And if it's gonna be a big deal, then we might have to reopen the hearing.
Well, we are, in fact, they're notifying abutters, and we're
Oh,
advertising
oh.
for a hearing.
Oh, so this is
This
already,
is not a minor, this is not a minor amendment, this is we're re-advertising,
oh,
and all the abutters are being re-notified.
okay, so this is significant, okay. So I guess we can go for 8:30. Worst comes to worst, we have to push it out, and hopefully we have the minutes and other things to discuss. Okay. So I don't know if I've been hearing Carol talk, Matt, anybody else care about, I guess, if we hear from town council. Well, I
I
guess.
mean,
What's
I
that?
mean, it seems to me that this idea of having a long running public hearing that's probably going to go on for several meetings is not particularly useful as a method of notifying the public. So we may as well set it for 7:15, open the hearing, and then it just remains open for until there's a draft, and the draft is the actual interesting thing where we want to get feedback from the public.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about time-wise or?
Yeah. Well, time-wise and process-wise, it sounds like that we would just say open it, schedule it for 7:15, open the hearing, and it just stays open.
Yeah, but people will, I'd rather be closer. I mean, in that case, I'd maybe do it for 8:15 in case it's still, and if our discussion on Maple Street keeps going on, we just sort of open it and move it to 8:30 or 8:45, depending on how Maple Street is going. I wouldn't, because part of the, right. Okay, but essentially, we're gonna do a hearing, no matter what town council has. We'll see how it goes. We can always close the hearing if we're finding that it's dragging on and doing it, but okay, so we're gonna open up a hearing that's basically includes much of our regulations. We'll come up with some sections there, since we do have a lot of changes.
The other question I had was, I heard, Michael, I heard both you and Carol mention bylaws, and I thought we were just scoping discussion to regulations, not bylaws.
Oh, yeah, we are. It's just a matter of looking at the bylaw it's in there just to reference back this whole language that I think isn't really much of an issue about this whole resource area versus that, and
Jacob, it's because that beginning part in that document, he's referencing the bylaw. We're not planning to change the bylaw, but he's referencing as support for our strong protection of the 0 to 100. That's basically summarizes what we were getting at.
okay. So we'll open up a hearing. And we'll do it for we'll figure out whether it's 8:15 or 8:30. I'll talk with you, Joyce. And Deborah, because we have to get it out. So if we sort this out, you're not in tomorrow, Deborah. We can get it in Monday morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Deborah's not in on Monday.
Oh, right.
Yeah, I mean, I can do it tomorrow. I don't have a problem.
Okay, fine. We'll figure. Well,
Okay, just let me know.
when after we finish this meeting, if the two of you could just stay on the Zoom call, so we can just sort out some logistics. Okay. Anybody else want anything more we want to talk about on this regulation stuff?
Nope.
Okay, is there any other issues that we need to talk about before we adjourn? Okay. I move to adjourn at 9:16.
Second,
Any discussion? Whoops, I guess I can get rid of this. Roll call vote. Carol,
aye.
Michael, I, Matt,
Aye.
Jacob,
Aye.
Steve,
Aye.
Courtney,
Aye.
and I want to ask Timothy or Joyce for Deborah. Meeting is adjourned.